Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Poema podcast. I am James Prescott, your host. Welcome back to the show. It's great to have you all here again. And today I have a new guest, and it's somebody that I've really wanted to have on the show for quite a while and talk about something that's close to my heart. So, welcome, Alice Hewson, to the
Hello.
podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. And you didn't tell me that you wanted me for a while, but
Oh,
that's
yeah,
lovely to hear.
I'm looking forward to this. Yeah. So, and you're just tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
So I'm holding a book up to the camera, but I realise this is audio, so this is not going to be useful to you, but I'm going to do it anyway. So my name is Alice Hewson, and I am author of a book called Neurodiversity in the Workplace: How to Create an Inclusive and Safe Environment, which is essentially, I guess, my story in terms of inclusion at work and wanting to advocate for change and systemic inclusion and universal design in the workplace, specifically for neurodivergent people. I have ADHD and dyspraxia, and I was diagnosed actually when I was a child, and then with ADHD much later in life, in my 30s. And this book is, I guess, my story of change and wanting to sort of make the world a better place and make the workplace a better place. It's taken from my lived experience of having more negative experiences at work and then realizing what inclusion looked like in the workplace. And when I turned, well, in my 30s, I realized what inclusion was like. And I was a bit sort of, I thought, I've taken all this time to understand what inclusion really looks like and feels like, and I needed to write a book about it. So yeah, I'm a writer, author. I write a blog post. I've written a blog for years as well, which is sort of stemmed into this book as well. But yeah, I'm very, very proud of it. I'm also working charity communications at the moment, and I'm also a youth worker by training too. So I have many hats, and I play the fiddle. I think that's it. But yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming on. And autism in the workplace is something that's close to home for me because, I'm neurodivergent. I'm autistic as well, and I've had challenges in the workplace with this, especially obviously when and what I mean is when I'm in the office generally around other people more than working at home. Uh, and and it's something I think needs to be talked about more because I think there needs to be more awareness about it. So I'm really glad there's a whole book on it now, which is it's really, really positive. I mean, to just tell us a little bit about what were your experiences in the workplace that kind of led to you writing this book. The challenging ones first, and then obviously the good ones as well.
Yeah, of course. So I began my career. So when I left school, really, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I think it all stemmed from being a teenager and nobody sitting down with you and saying, "This is what your neurodivergent will mean at work. This is how it will impact you." Nobody did that. When I was at school, it was very much all around academic achievement, which was important. You had to pass exams, but there was a lot more to academia than and especially for neurodivergent young people in terms of offering support. So that's kind of where it stemmed from. Not really understanding who I was, struggling with a sense of identity, and I guess a sense of purpose in terms of understanding what I was good at, where my strengths and weaknesses lie, and which direction I could go into really. So I had a bit of a kind of, I don't know. I think everybody's career path is different, and nobody is on like a linear straight line to anything. It just, they make you believe that in school. You go to university, then you get a great job, and then your world will be sorted forever. And that is not the case at all. So everybody takes different paths, but I think when you're younger, especially, sort of, you feel because you haven't followed a similar path to some of your friends, you feel othered, you feel different, you feel a sense of, well, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do those things? Why haven't I worked out what I want to do the rest of my life by the age of, I don't know, 19, 20? I don't think many 19, 20-year-olds ever do. And I think if they tell you that they have, I think it's a massive lie, to be honest. But yeah, so I went along and I went to uni, and then I went to uni again, and I did a master's in youth and community work. and I worked as a youth worker for many years. And on top of the youth work, I was also writing. I've written since I was about 16, um, and even younger, really. I was always writing about my experiences, not necessarily at work, but my experiences as a neurodivergent, then somebody who was in my 20s, growing up and understanding who I was. And I wrote a lot around about loneliness and kind of isolation that I felt at the time. Um, and then, so my experiences at work stemmed from managers that didn't support me, managers that used the Myers-Briggs assessment and told me that my personality had to change because I didn't fit her ideal of a youth worker. Um, which is, I think, when especially when you're younger. Now I think I have a different response. I'd probably challenge it a little bit more. But then when you're young, you're new to the workplace, you're trying to work everything out for yourself. Plus, you're trying to navigate how your brain works and that you work a little bit differently to other people. You get this sense of, you internalize a lot of things. There's lots of feelings of failure, feelings of, am I good enough to be here? And that's sort of what that experience um, gave me, I think, at the time. And then I've gone on to different. I've had managers that haven't supported me. I've had people who I've asked for reasonable adjustments and it hasn't been listened to, and I've had to remind people. And I just haven't really felt that I could belong anywhere, really. There has been other workplaces where my colleagues have been fab and I've had a great, like, they have been brilliant. But I didn't really feel that I could belong. And I think it was really only once I was diagnosed with ADHD in the middle of the pandemic as well. So, okay, so this is kind of part of me as well. Um, and trying to piece all those things together. And so really I think sort of those experiences of not knowing, not having the language, I think that's really important. At the time I didn't have the language to explain my differences. I didn't have the vocabulary necessarily. Maybe I was very bright, I was a very intelligent young woman. I managed to go to university and do all these things, but I didn't have the language and nobody had sat down with me. And I'd had like lots of different therapy and NHS talking therapies and various other therapies up until that point. So I was quite therapied out in terms of like supporting my mental health and the anxiety that I was feeling. Um, but I couldn't verbalize that the reason I was feeling all this anxiety was because I hadn't found somewhere to belong and feel included at work. I didn't have that language. I couldn't tell anybody. I was like, I feel like this, but I don't know. I can't tell you why. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So yeah, so these sort of, there's a lots of experiences, and there's a lot later on, before I found another workplace that was much more positive, and specifically, I think my line manager was more positive. I had to put workplace grievances in, challenge workplace bullying, um, and realized then when I was going through a grievance procedure, I was going through this process. I realized that these processes are very much set up to protect the organization, protect the line management and the CEOs and people who are at the top of organizations. There's very little in place, in a lot of places. Some other organizations might be different, to support the employee going through what can be quite a traumatic experience. And I'd never really disclosed in interviews. I'd never felt that I could tell people about my differences, about my neurodivergence, until my last jobs. I had an interview and I did it disclose in my interview. Um, and the difference that made, and I was disclosing that interview because I felt safe, I felt comfortable. And this was just in the interview. I hadn't met these people. It was all online. Um, and I felt that I could trust them with that information. And I felt they were the type of people and the type of organisation who could support me, and I'd never really felt like that before. And so it was lots of little things. Um, I guess became a turning point in my life, in my career. And at that point, I'd had I'd gone to uni again, so I did my youth work, and I went back to uni and did journalism. So I did an MA in journalism, um, because I enjoyed writing and because I felt that I could sort of I wanted to write I felt that I had this talent and had this skill, and I wanted to use this platform to write about people, to tell people stories, to share, and give people a voice, I guess, who don't have a voice for whatever reason, or unable to communicate, or don't have the language to verbalize things when I was younger. Um, so I went into journalism, and sort of now I work in charity communications, and that's kind of my specialism. It's come from journalism and working for charities, sharing key messages about different causes, depending on what charity I work for. But yeah, that's kind of a very quick history of where of why.
Yeah, yeah, and I understand that. Like, because when you're in, and neurodivergent people will understand this. Like, that when you're in the workplace, especially in an office environment, like you have to make accommodations for yourself, even without anyone knowing you've made them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to set up
Yeah,
things in your head, like to stop you having meltdowns, right? Because this is something I have to do anyway. One thing I do is I like, like when you go into the office and it's like everything, it's like one of those days where everything is going wrong. Like you just missed the bus, or like or they run out of tea at the coffee place just when you get there, or whatever. Something, every little thing is going wrong, right? And then you have work, and you have all the pressures of work and all the tasks you have to do, and maybe someone gives you something to do, like out of the blue, and it's this big job and you weren't expecting it. And
yeah,
when you're autistic, like that can throw you a little bit, right? So what I've done, and I started doing this about a year or two ago. I created this rule, with like this
mm,
autistic rule, which is called one of those days, right? And people who listen to this show will probably know about this already, but which is like when I know I'm going to have a day like that, when my
yeah,
day starts like that, and I can see that that's where it's going. I just like almost decide with myself, oh, it's one of those days, and then that almost means that my mind is prepared for it.
yeah,
Like I've set myself up for that possibly happening.
mm,
And so, and that's really really important for autistic people, is to like have things set up so that you feel safe, so that you don't have a meltdown. And with that, so that little thing that I do internally sets me up so that if one of those days comes, I can deal with the pressure without having a meltdown,
mm,
because I'm kind of prepared that something could happen, something unexpected could happen, something bad could happen, something could go wrong. Like in my head, it's like that could happen.
yeah.
So at least if it does happen, I'm not surprised by it. You know?
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's like looking at it's managing, navigating the unexpected, isn't it? And like you said, there's lots of things in your day that can be more challenging if you're neurodivergent, from, getting up in the morning, being organized, to have everything, to leave the house on time, to have everything that you need, traveling, public transport. There's lots of different steps even before you've walked in the door of the office, of things that can be quite exhausting. So you do feel, a lot of people who do work in an office environment, I have done in the past, if they are traveling to work, you generally feel that you've done a whole day's work before you've even stepped in the door, and you're
Yeah,
exhausted.
exactly. Yeah,
And a lot of people don't see that, and I think that's why it's hidden. People don't see what is hidden. People don't, unless you tell them, oh, this has been really difficult for me. People aren't going to know that you have those challenges in the morning that are different for other people. And this is why I talk a lot about sort of new universal design and systemic inclusion, and looking at the design of workplaces specifically, and like, well, how can you make this design inclusive for neurodivergent people, so that they don't always have to ask for something? Because some people can get so overwhelmed, the last thing they physically feel able to do is say to their line manager, this thing is really distressing to me at this moment. I need to go and sit in I need some quiet space. But for example, if there is a quiet room that's built into the office design that anybody can use, neurodivergent or not, and I feel that, universal design, it benefits everyone. It's not just for neurodivergent people. And then that is a good thing. It's a good thing for an organization. And I use this a lot in terms of my analogy of a lift. So when you most buildings, unless they've got listed sort of the regulations where they can't make moderations, but most buildings have to have a lift for accessibility for wheelchair users, and this enables wheelchair users to access all the floors of the lift. And they're able to access all the floors so that they are able to access just as everybody else. They don't have to ask for that lift. You're not going to build that lift as soon as you know that you're going to join your organization, or they're going to join your company that works on the third floor of a building. You will always have that lift generally. It's something that you have to do. And this is the same with neurodivergent inclusion and hidden differences and difficulties that you can't see. You need to always assume that you're going to have a neurodivergent person working for you, and you have to make your building physical design, but also in terms of policies and practice and overall workplace culture inclusive, so that people don't have to go in on a morning and say, I need this, because it should always be there provided. And it's not just for neurodivergent people, it's for everybody. And it's to make everybody feel safe. And you sort of mentioned before about that kind of concept of feeling safe and secure and having something that you can manage your own feelings and your own experiences, and I guess a method, sort of a coping strategy to do that. And lots of people will have these different coping strategies, and I think it is on the managers and the line managers and CEOs and people at the top of organizations. They have a lot of power, and they can get it right, and they can be the difference to making somebody's time in the workplace a positive experience to causing the opposite and a lot of workplace trauma. And that's what I really do believe passionately in, that together with neurodivergent people and line managers and other colleagues who work with neurodivergent people, collectively we can co-design a better world and a safer, happier environment for everybody, which is what I've tried to put across my book and sort of all the campaigning I do now as well as a result of it. Yeah.
That's right, and that's it. It's this concept of safe space for autistic people is really important, and I actually didn't realise that something I had was a safe space once until I went somewhere else for like a month and realised that they didn't have that, and I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I having a panic attack? This is like one of the safest places I could ever be.
Yeah.
You know, why would I have a panic attack? And then I realised, oh, I haven't got my sofa, my TV, everything set up for me to watch as I want to watch.
Yeah.
And that's a safe thing for me. And I didn't realise how much of a safe thing it was for me until that moment. Like, because you always get like, when you're at home, things at home, you just think, oh, that's being at home. Like, it's not unusual, like, or whatever. It's not but it was, and that's really important for autistic people to feel like, in a sense, to feel like they're in control of their own space, and that they're safe there. And if
Yeah, of course.
and it's when we lose that we can get uncomfortable and maybe even have meltdowns, and so it's like it's about, I guess it's about trying to make sure that we always have those safe spaces wherever we are.
Yeah.
As well, like,
and I think safe spaces, but also safe people. And I do feel that, especially at work, I was so lucky. My line manager is wonderful. Was wonderful. I don't work there anymore, but she is done a lot to support me and be that safe person at work. And I felt comfortable asking her for advice, going to her if I needed to, and saying, "Look, I don't feel comfortable with this thing. Can we chat about it?" And she's always would. And I feel that in the workplace, you need to be that safe person for people. You need to be that approachable, empathetic, kind, and person who will listen. And I think a lot of people are too busy a lot of the time managing targets and the day-to-day running of a workplace, but actually looking after your people and keeping them there is just as important, I think. But yeah, definitely safe. Looking at how can you create that safe environment, and it's not just, obviously, we've talked about the physical environment. You talked about being at home and having a sofa and having a TV and having stuff that feels safe to you. Um, but in the workplace, obviously having that safe environment where it's comfortable and familiar and all the rest of it when you come into work. But that safe environment might allow home working as well. And I think that is something that's really important. I've homeworked, and that's how I work best. I don't really do very well in an office, if I'm honest. I prefer to work at home. So
Yes,
that safe environment,
absolutely.
yeah,
Because it's the environment that you create around yourself. Like, so when I moved house, I was able to move the same desk and the same chair
yeah,
to that to where I am now, uh, and that means I was able to basically have the same work setup,
yeah,
exactly the same, and so that made a huge difference.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, wherever I move in future, I'll have, I've already talked about this because I'm probably going to be moving to America
yeah,
with my wife, and we've already talked about like setting a space up for me that is a safe space,
mm,
and planning ahead, and making sure that's all in place. Like,
hmm,
it's really it's really important, yeah, and safe people, like you say, like having safe community, having safe friends, partners if you have a partner, like uh, that you can just be you with.
yeah. And I
Uh,
think that's really important, like being who you. And I think that definitely when I was younger, when I didn't disclose, I tried to be somebody else. I didn't want to be Alice. I didn't like who I was, or I didn't really understand who I was. But I think it's really important to be yourself, not just around your family, around your friends, but also obviously at work, to be able to not mask. And a lot of neurodivergent people mask. They pretend. They try and mask their traits. They try and mask who they are, and they sort of like try and become neurotypical for the day, which can only cause overwhelm and distress. And when you come home, you're so exhausted because you've been trying to hide who you are all day. And it's not good for you long term. It's not. Um, there is a reason that neurodivergent people are more susceptible to mental illness and mental health struggles throughout their life, because they're forced to adapt to a neurotypical world, and a world isn't built for them. So of course they're going to struggle. Um, I'm trying to think of an analogy. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I have cats, so it's going to involve cats. But yeah, it's like if you have some cats and then you make them go and live with a pack of dogs. I don't know, maybe that's not very good. I don't know where I'm going with this one, but yeah, and they have to like conform to like barking and like all dog behavior that cats don't do. And then they're going to be exhausted if they've had to bark all day and not meow. I don't know where I'm going with this. Yeah, it's going to be tiring. They're going to maybe the cats won't be tired. I don't know, but yeah, what I'm trying to say essentially is that we need to be mindful of spaces and what your space that you've created does to other people, and is it inclusive, is it supportive, is it welcoming, and yeah, is it safe? And I think safe space has been quite a buzzword in recent years. We see it a lot
yeah,
online. It's kind
absolutely,
of a thing. But
yeah,
what is safe? What does it mean? And I was thinking about this the other day, and I sort of concluded that safe is different to other people, but everybody's got a different idea of what safety is, and what it feels to be safe. And I think that is, in terms of line management in the workplace, the best way to understand what makes that person safe, the person you're line managing, because every neurodivergent person is different.
yeah,
Once you've worked one of us, you've only worked one of us. We're all different. We've
yeah,
all got
exactly.
different, ask them what they need. And I think the best thing my line manager had ever done for me is say, Alice, what do you need? What can I do for you? And I think that is it was a bit of a turning point, I guess. It's like, somebody's asking me what I want. No one's ever done this before. They've always just assumed or not done anything. So yeah, I think that asking what they need, and what is safe to you. And I used to work for a mental health charity quite a few years ago now, actually. and then a job then. So I had a really good relationship with my line manager. This is another workplace which I loved, and I was only there for a year, but I got on really well with my line manager and everybody, all my colleagues, and we all had lived experience of mental illness, which I think probably helped us, I guess, become a bit of a united unit. But yeah, so we did a RAP well-being plan. So RAP plans are great, and I feel that RAP plans, when done well, can be really, really powerful and really supportive. But when not done well, they can have the opposite effect. And I feel that you have to have a good relationship with your line manager to be able to sit down and complete a RAP. So for people who don't know, a RAP is essentially well-being. When I'm well, this is this is how I am. When I'm not well, this is the triggers. These are my triggers. This is what my manager can do to support me. And you write this down in the document, and so the manager knows, right, if Alice can't verbalize how she's feeling, this is what I need to look out for. These are the triggers, so we must avoid these things. This is what I can do. So a line manager can put things in place before you even have to ask for it, because you've had that discussion. And I think that's really important, understanding your well-being. Not many workplaces actually, there might be a sort of variations of RAP plans. You can get different ones. But yeah, and that was really helpful, I think, for me, is being able to sit down with my line manager and say, right, I get really anxious about, for example, time. Okay, how are we going to mitigate this? What are we going to do? And these kind of plans stop something from escalating.
Yeah, I've
To
never
get
had
yeah.
that RAP plan before. Like, so what is just? Can you just explain that a little bit more? Like,
Yeah, so it's a well-being recovery action plan.
oh, okay, yeah,
I think that's what they're, yes, they're called different names, but basically it's sort of a RAP is looking at your well-being. So how what keeps you well? How can you be well? What are the signs from when you might not be feeling so great or um, getting unwell? And then what can your line manager to do to support you? And then identifying things like triggers. And it's a very personal document in a lot of ways, and a lot of people might probably won't want to have these conversations with line managers depending on your relationship. But
yeah,
for me, it was and I worked for a mental health charity, and I knew that I was in that safe place. I knew that there were people around me who kind of got this stuff. So it might not work for some professions, but it did work in my. But RAP plans are great, or even just having conversations. You don't have to formalize it into a document. Um, One thing I talk about a lot is communication and making time for checking in. And I think it's really important that line managers check in on you as well. Not just to check in that you're doing the work, but also to check that you're okay and that you understand things. And one thing that my line manager got me to do was to playback things that she just to make sure that I'd processed it all and that I was feeling confident and comfortable with what we had to do. So if we were in team meetings, she'd say, right, Alice, can you tell me what I just told you? And that really gave me a good, I guess.
that's
There's
really,
lots of little techniques as well that I guess is line managers are different. They've all got different styles of managing people.
yeah, like that. That's a really cool idea. I like that idea. Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to figure. My boss is really good generally because I think he has a brother who's neurodivergent,
Mhm.
uh, and so he's been really supportive of helping me figure out some of these strategies for dealing with
Yeah,
things. So, like when there's something, so we both know that when there's a new process that comes in, that I need to take special care when that happens, right? And I need to do the training, and I need to make lots of notes, and I need to go
yeah,
through it a few times, and maybe talk to him about it, and that means that I won't have a meltdown when I have to start doing it, right?
yeah,
Because there were some instances when I started there where I had lots of new processes all at once,
yeah,
right? And I had a meltdown in the office, and it
hmm
was embarrassing.
yeah,
So we had to. I mean, I didn't get in trouble, but like, obviously, we had to have like conversations about why that happened, and
yeah,
I knew I was autistic, and I knew that I probably had ADHD as
yeah,
well, and so we were able to talk about that. and clear it all. And we've made a lot of progress since, but there's still a lot of things I think they could do better. But it's definitely better than other places that I've worked in terms of accommodations for me. Like, and my line manager is very good at helping me with that.
Yeah, yeah. I think having a line manager who is open to being supportive, but also open to learning, and I think a lot of it is, trial and error. Especially in a new kind of line management relationship as well. They're getting to know you, you're getting to know them, you're trying to work out what works best for both of you in terms of your how you're going to work together, but also how you're going to complete the tasks depending on what your career you're in terms of your wider organizational priorities as well. But yeah, definitely, I think that being supported to manage change, and it's interesting because I'm contributing to another book around organizational change. So I had a conversation yesterday, and we were talking about how can line managers support neurodivergent people with change, and what can they do. And I thought about this, and one of the things I said to her was that communication is really important, and understanding how different people prefer to communicate, because how you communicate the change all comes down to communication, and a lot of people prefer things emailed to them before a phone call. Some people might prefer a phone call to discuss things rather than email, and lots of people have different methods that they prefer.
Yeah,
Um, a lot of people, me included, will prefer. So, for example, if you are going to have a meeting with somebody, discuss somebody, rather than say, "Are you free for a chat?" That could open a can of worms of somebody catastrophizing that everything's going to go wrong. They're going to be given the sack. All this, I've done something terrible at work, because a chat could mean anything. Whereas if you're a bit more specific in your email and say, "I would like to have a phone call with you on this day. I would like to chat about X and see how you're feeling about whatever it is." And then you know what's coming up and you can prepare yourself for that meeting. And I think that's really important for a lot of people, that to have that communication and make it clear communication as well. And I think a lot of people struggle with things when they're a bit too ambiguous, or there is some change coming, but you don't know what, you don't know when, or you don't know how it'll affect you. And I know that change can be, it's not always set in stone. It's quite an evolving process in itself. But I think it's having those strategies, like you say, okay, I'm going to be overwhelmed by this in the office. How can I mitigate against that? Is there a way where I can step outside, or something else can happen, um, that I can sort of to support myself? And what can the people around me do? And it doesn't have to be a line manager. It can be colleagues. If you have a good relationship with colleagues, and if they understand, or they know you're neurodivergent, and I think that's really important, having those people at work who you can go to.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had someone like that actually. He used to work the same days as me, and in the office, I mean, and she was always so helpful. Like, I think her partner was neurodivergent as well, and
Hmm.
she's done a lot of research on it, and so she was really like, I could open up to her a bit about the things I was, you know, struggling with,
Yeah,
and some of the challenges that I had, and she was just always so helpful. Like, if I was struggling with something, I could just ask her without having a meltdown, and
yeah,
she would help me out. Sometimes she even did it for me, like if it was something she could do, and
yeah,
just having that was really, really, really helpful, because it just took the pressure off a bit. That you don't feel alone anymore, right? So
yeah,
that's why you're talking about, safe people are really important. That because they lower your like they lower the temperature in a
mm,
sense. It means that because when you feel alone, that can make it more stressful
yeah,
as an autistic person. But when you have people there who you intuitively know are safe,
mm,
and will help you, and this is in the workplace, whether could be your boss or somebody else or both,
yeah,
it just takes a bit of pressure off, and you've got someone to go to if you need some support. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that is, and you've really touched sort of feeling alone. I think I certainly have felt alone at work. I felt alone navigating who I was, understanding my identity, and there's a lot of isolation and a lot of loneliness. You can be lonely in a crowded office, you can still feel alone. Um, and it's about making people feel less alone, and that you might relate to their differences. And I felt really empowered that I've spoken to lots of other neurodivergent people, and I felt that I'm part of a tribe, I'm part of a team. And funnily enough, a lot of my friends, who I didn't know were neurodivergent at the time, have all, if not, yeah, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of people I knew when I was growing up in my teens and 20s are all neurodivergent. A lot of people have got late diagnoses, which shows that even if you don't know, you're attracted to a tribe. You're attracted to safe people. You can sort of seek them out and find them. So yeah, I think it's just that, making people, and I feel that it's not just the managers or line managers' responsibility to make people feel more part of a team. It's everybody's, so that people don't feel alone. And there's an analogy in my book, around, so it's if you book a table at a restaurant, you don't ask for a chair. You'd always expect it to be there. You'd expect your chair to be there when you make that reservation. And the same as with neurodivergent inclusion, you shouldn't have to ask for something that isn't already there to make you feel safe and comfortable and supported and be able to enjoy your time there comfortably. If you're sitting on the floor and you're eating a meal, it's not really a very comfortable experience. And nobody should be made to sit on the floor. And that's literally what people are doing.
Unbelievable. Every time I think that this world can't get any crazier, I should just accept that it's crazy, shouldn't I? I mean, that's just nuts. Yeah, people shouldn't be having to eat their lunch on the floor.
Yeah.
Like, just awful. Yeah, I mean, I think what we've talked about is like that there are some good workplaces and some bad ones,
Mm-hmm.
and that we've both had experiences of good ones and bad ones. But basically, like, it feels like that it is possible to create a workplace where neurodivergent people can feel safe and accepted and supported, and that's it's just a matter of businesses, organisations, whatever, employers uh, taking the time to do that,
Yeah.
and investing to do that. That's obviously always the problem, isn't it? They've got to invest time, money to do it. But it is important, and because it helps neurodivergent people be more productive ultimately, and there's no reason why neurodivergent people should be prejudiced against in the workplace, or shouldn't get jobs just because they're neurodivergent. And that's why this book is so important. So,
Yeah.
like, what do you think is like the core message of your book?
So from my experience, that change is possible, that it is possible to be inclusive and supportive of neurodivergent people. And that most of the time, a lot of these adjustments are accommodations or different ways of doing something in practice and policies. It's not going to break the bank of most organisations. Having a supportive workplace culture is possible because I've seen it in action. I've been managed by people who really did care about me and continue to do so. And I think that if we all work together towards systemic inclusion and universal design, we'll have a happier, safer place for everybody where we can thrive, we can climb the career ladder, we can show people what we can do without having barriers that are put in our way. Like we talked at the beginning of, when you're getting out of the door and all these things you have to do in the morning, and the exhaustion and fatigue you'll feel as a result that people don't see. If we can alleviate some of those barriers, both in the community and also in the workplace. And there's a lot of barriers around, I don't know, like sort of public transport and shop. There's lots of difficulties. I think that we will have a happier society. Yeah, and I just think that it's about working together, listening to each other, and communicating the right ways with your neurodivergent colleagues, and to sort of create this world where everybody can be accepted. People aren't wishing for 5 p.m. on a Friday. That isn't a way to live. To wish for the end of the week. It really, really isn't. And I want hope. I think my book is written. I've written it. I waited until I had a more positive experience. I didn't want to write a negative book. It's a positive book. And I wanted to provide hope for the neurodivergent people that things can change and it will change and it is possible for change. You just need people and the right kind of people at the head of that change to make it happen. And that's why I'm doing a lot of talk at the moment with different organizations to talk about how they can create change, or even if they are beginning this change, talking about what they can do differently. Is it working? How can they support other people? And I think a lot of it can be done through learning, reflecting, and working together, and looking at practices from other organizations, other businesses, and seeing whether you can learn from them. And I think it is a collective process, and inclusion is everybody's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility to be inclusive.
Absolutely.
And that is kind of a message that it's everybody, we must take this responsibility, and change is possible for us all. And I think that, it's just, I'm so proud of like being able to produce this book and being able to kind of share that message with the world, that sort of the, if you think back sort of like some of the barriers and the challenge I faced when I was much younger, and being able to now I talked about not having the language to explain my differences, not knowing how to, and now I do it quite well. And I talk on podcasts like this, and I do interviews, and I talk to a lot of organizations around this topic and around inclusion. And I've always come back to one thing, which is I'm only one person. I've written a book about it, which I'm so proud of, but we need to be a team. And I think that, we talk about how to type change management and managing teams, and there's lots of buzzwords within like different sectors around teamwork and cooperation. But what we really, really need to do is just listen to people's stories, listen to people's experiences. But, and the big but, don't use people's trauma for your learning and education. I don't think neurodivergent people should be made to feel that they have to lead on this change. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of people have very differences and difficulties in their life. And I feel that you shouldn't use other people's lived experience for your education. So just because you've got an autistic or an
Absolutely.
ADHD people in your workplace, don't think, oh, I can go to them and get some advice about this. Go and do your own learning. And that's, I think, is really important. Go and learn. And if people want to share the lived experience with you, obviously, yes, listen to them, but don't feel that they must be like there for your education, because that isn't going to be helpful for anybody at all.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. This has been a really good conversation around a really important subject. So thank you. And where can people get your book?
Oh, yes, of course. So it's available on Amazon. It's also available on Trigger Publishers, and you can also order it from the Waterstones website. And if you're in the US, it's also available from Barnes and Noble, and also the US version of Amazon as well. So yes, you can get it internationally, not just in the UK. But yeah, and my website is alicehewson.com, and you can find all about me. I'm available for talks in um, workplaces as well. And you can find me on all the social media. So I'm on Twitter, but I'm not really using Twitter very often now, actually. So Blue Sky, really, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn as well, and Instagram. I've got a Facebook page. But Alice Hewson, if you just search for me, I should appear.
Yes, absolutely. And do give Alice a follow. Definitely do, and check out the book. 100%. Thank you. So thanks, Alice, for coming on. Really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.